Chris, thanks for joining me. Firstly, who have been some of your past coaches and how have they impacted you?
An enormous impact, the coaches I've had, particularly when I was a teenager and it came down to play for the Melbourne Football Club. So Ron Barassi was the coach and Ray Jordan was the under-19 coach. So I played under both those. Great coaches, a lot of experience, and Ron was more than just a footy coach. He was a life coach, whereas for Ray it was more about the technical side of the game and the leadership involved. But I think the values they imparted I've been able to carry through my whole career.
As you mentioned, you can impact people off the field as well, but how far does the influence of a coach extend?
Well, in many ways you're coaching the person, because a lot of the values and behaviours you're looking to have a training and on the playing field are the same values and behaviours that help shape someone in life and the challenges they have in other aspects of their life. So you cannot separate the two. You need to grow the person as well as the footballer. It does go hand in hand. Football is great in terms of building players for the challenges in life. It helps really shape their resilience, their concentration, their goal setting, all the things that are really important for quality performance. And when I look back, I returned to Melbourne as a football manager. I started in 1981 and I returned back to Melbourne in 2008. And in that time, I'd gone back through all the players that had played at Melbourne, and besides a couple out of over 100, most had done really well in life with their families and their business and their education. And I think a lot of the fundamentals they learnt within the footy club played its part in that. The players that had issues were the ones that really had addictions, if you like, illicit drugs and gambling addictions. But there's only 2 or 3 of those. And when they did have a problem, there was a support network that helped them get out of that problem. But they've battled a little bit through life, but the other guys have really gone on and done well.
What kind of similarities does sport share with life, and how do you and your support staff build them up in players?
Well, firstly, life's tough and football's tough. And because you're under the spotlight and there's a physicality to it, it's really tough on different fronts. So a lot of the challenges on the field can be similar in a sense to off the field. So the first step is to improve your performance, is to just have basic goal setting and action plan in place and keep it that simple. But having said that, there needs to be goals around lots of aspects of the footballer. So whether it's individual skills, team skills, mental skills, physical skills. Also because of the nature of the game, there's going to be disappointments, particularly with injury or not being selected. So they need to be resilient enough to deal with that. With every challenge, there's a lot of excitement and rewards if you achieve the goal. But if you don't achieve the goal at a given time, the goals can be reset or a new action plan in place to achieve them. But nevertheless, if they haven't been achieved, there's a lot of learning from that. So this notion of growth mindset's about learning from your mistakes. So players will go out and mistakes will happen and they'll learn from that. Even though the immediate reference point is disappointment, again, reset the action plan, the goals, learn from it and perform better the next time. You almost can't improve without failure being a part of it, and not just inspiring you to achieve the next goal, but helping you bring clarity to how you're going to go about planning out to achieve that goal. So those things then get taken into aspects of your life. Now, the real challenge is on the field playing football, there's a real purpose in your responsibility as an individual and your responsibility to the team and the club. The challenge with football is we've got to make sure they've got the same purpose once they finish playing football. And sometimes that can be a bit tough to find. I think a lot of students at uni, and I'd gone to uni, and certainly kids in high school, they don't really know what they want to do. But that's completely normal. But the search is on and a purpose will come. Sometimes it sneaks up onto you. Sometimes clarity becomes evident. You're exposed to different things in life. Other times it takes a little bit longer. You've got to go through a few challenges to work out what you really want to do. But that purpose in life is a real challenge for footballers. They have an obvious purpose on the field. But once that purpose in life is in front of them, they've developed all the skills to go ahead and have a lot of success in that journey of what they're trying to achieve.
You would have had up to 40 players on your list. How do you get the most out of each and every one of them?
Treat them as individuals. So we play within a team, but they've got to maximise their potential as individuals. Now, just simplifying it into 4 challenges. Individual skills. They've got to develop their skills as an individual, which is linked into their capabilities and the role they play in the team. The next thing is team skills. Now, you're a part of a group, a smaller group, whether it's midfield, forward, back, and then the greater team, and you've got to understand your responsibilities in that. But then there's physical skills that you have to develop with yourself, and then the mental skills. What are things that come a little bit more natural? What are things that you've really got to develop to become consistently good at? Once you break it back to the individual, and that's just the on-the-field stuff, let alone the off-the-field stuff, because you need a balanced footballer with their life to maximise what they're going to do on the field. So then it's about that individual growing and then coming in to be part of the team and then connecting the team. And the team connects by understanding what they've got to do together and then just practicing till the cows come home and practicing in an environment where mistakes are going to happen again. So as a team, we learn and move forward. So, you try and, as a coach, keep it that simple. And there's over 40 players to deal with. And not just not the players when you're a senior coach, you've got all your staff too that you've got to continually develop. So it's a big responsibility, but a very meaningful one. When you see, I coach Brad and Chris Scott, who are now senior AFL coaches, you get a big kick out of that. But then I go back to the community clubs in country areas and I see players like Marcus Bozzuglo at East Ringwood have an incredible impact on the young men playing at the East Ringwood Football Club. And then you see people in life being successful with their families. And you think you had a bit to do with that, just like Ron Barassi, Ray Jordan, John Northey, these guys influenced me, you hope, and certainly enabled me to develop, or assisted me to develop skills I took through life. I hope I've done that with them. And that's probably the best bit to coaching.
What's your approach to delivering feedback?
Feedback has to be immediate. And it has to be accurate. Now, there's a little bit of a contradiction there. You'll only give the immediate feedback if it's accurate. Now, from an individual point of view, that can be done. If you've not positioned yourself well or you've made an error in judgment or you didn't, it can be pretty accurate. But often in the team situation, you've actually got to go and look at the tape again. You've got to reanalyse the game because there's a lot going on out there, and I learned early in my coaching career that the way I saw the game on match days is different to how it really was. So often it's immediate to the individual if there's clarity with it, but I like to make sure the feedback is accurate, because if it's accurate, you've got a chance of the player understanding what they did well, what they need to do well, and then you can put a practice program in place to make sure they're consistent with it or they can improve on it. So there's a little bit of they're the 2 things to consider.
Some players might not take on feedback as well as other players. How do you tailor your approach so you get your message across?
Players learn at different rates. Often with an experienced player, you don't have to, you can just make a comment and they pick it up straight away. In fact, often with a senior player, you don't really have to say what you want to say, just the law course, and they'll just give you the nod. With younger players, they don't understand. And often their greatest strengths, their greatest weakness, that they got to being an AFL guy because they're really selfish and they see the world, this is how it is, and this is what's worked with me to get to this level. So sometimes they need to be pruned back a bit, and it just takes a little bit of time for the penny to drop. An example of that would be sometimes you have a forward and they're not working hard enough, and you try and teach them in different ways, show them footage of guys who do work hard, put heart rate monitors on them, give them feedback from the defender who's on them. still doesn't drop. So then you may have to play them in defence in a real game and put them on a player that really works hard, and then the penny drops. So, there's different ways of having players understand where they're at. If they don't understand where they're at, they can't improve. It's the first stage of learning. For younger players, bringing clarity and having an understanding of certain aspects of football is a bit of a challenge, and they all learn at different rates.
What are some of the qualities and characteristics of highly influential coaches?
Firstly, for coaches, they need to have an understanding of the technical side of the game. So they've got to be good at teaching individual skills, and they've got to be good at teaching team skills. Now, for them to do that, they have to be technically good at the game. The next thing is that, depending on the level the coach is coaching at, he is going to manage a lot of people. From AFL now, it can be up to 30 people, and these people are experts in their field, which makes them a little bit odd because these people have a vision 2 miles deep and 2 inches wide, but very smart in their areas, and you'll need to manage them and need to manage them as individuals. Yes, there's certain consistencies you have with job descriptions and these types of action plans for development programs, but at the end of the day, they have to be treated individually, so management skills are really important. Communication skills, coaches that can communicate, not just in your understanding the game match day or understanding how you've got to improve as an individual during the week, but also being able to inspire. I mean, they've got to be able to motivate. Good coaches develop leadership skills in their staff and players, and that's by giving them responsibility. The coach has to be a leader themselves, so they have to, and you can lead in different ways, but they have to lead by taking responsibility for all actions around the club and the team as a starting point. And coaches have to be, they have to be made of good staff. They have to, and look, all coaches can't tick all the boxes either. So they need good support staff. But in terms of values around the human being, the modern coach needs that empathy, let's say, as one characteristic. But if it doesn't come naturally, you can have support staff that help you. But you have to have a certain level of empathy. Probably the greatest challenge in terms of the personal stuff as an individual is honesty. I mean, how honest do you be? Now, people say we're an honest club. Well, as a coach, you've really got to work that out, because sometimes being totally honest with a player, now sometimes they need that reference point if they're not getting where you're trying to take them as a player, but it could destroy them at the same time. So you've got to get that balance right. I mean, you've just got to make sure sometimes you don't tell them all the truth because it might spook them, whether that's being dishonest or not. But just that clarity around honesty needs to be defined. And the reason values around a club need to be defined is that everyone has a different interpretation of them. But if there's the common definition, they're the values that we want to focus on, then everyone can be measured against that because there's a definition of it and everyone understands it. But these things need a lot of greyness taken out of them, and that can be a challenge. And that's why I always say experience in coaching is really important, because you've done all that. You don't want to, at AFL level, be on the spotlight and be changing the goalposts or contradicting yourself. I think if you contradict yourself, you're going to lose the trust of the people that you're leading, because there's a lot at stake for them, and they really want to trust you. But if you let yourself down, they can't, and that's a problem.
Have you ever had players, either during their career or after their career, come up to you and comment on something you might have said or done that impacted them a lot further than you thought it might have at the time?
Yes, for sure. Sometimes they write books and say things, and things can be taken out of context. Often with a player, you've got a lot of players and you do treat them differently, but sometimes it might be a player who has a tendency to get ahead of themselves. Has a tendency to just lose sight of to be grounded. Sometimes you can be heavy-handed with those people at training, in meetings, and aggressive. And I think you take a punt as a coach that's going to really kind of inspire them to do well and certainly get them on the right wavelength. But people who don't understand what you're trying to do mightn't see it that way and might see that you're mistreating that player. So that's a difficult challenge, and that's why, you know, your leadership group in an AFL club, and I'm sure other sports have them, need to understand what we're trying to do as a coaching staff. So if there is any confusion amongst the playing group, those loose ends can be picked up pretty quickly. And that's only been a recent phenomenon, to be honest. I mean, when the game was semi-professional, and a lot of sports around the country are now, sometimes there can be some misinterpretation of the coaching. But when the coach is coaching an individual a certain way, he also has to have the awareness that not just the playing group, but other staff members or certainly the committee might see it a little bit differently. I missed out on the communication with the committee. You've got to be able to communicate up as well as down. You're just talking about communicating with your players. You've got to communicate with your staff, and you've got to communicate up with the executive committee, the decision makers in your club. So there's a lot to learn. And look, to be honest, the only way you're going to really learn about this caper is to get out and have a go and make a lot of mistakes. Not too many, but enough to really make you grow. And that's how you do learn. There is no coach I've ever known or player I've ever known that hasn't made a wealth of mistakes, hundreds of mistakes, but quickly learn from those mistakes and improve their performance.
You hear of some coaches inviting over the players for dinner at the house. What are some of the other coaching 1%ers?
Well, the coach is in many sports is the face of the club. Now, the club's a non-profit organisation that pays out a lot of funds, particularly for equipment and staff, and needs to raise funds through sponsorship, membership and whatnot. So you've got to be involved in that. I mean, you don't want to be spending too much time doing that, but you certainly need to be involved in that. You need to be involved in recruiting. You're certainly not the decision maker in a well-structured club with recruiting, but certainly the biggest influencer. So you need to be involved in that. In terms of the personal stuff with players, it just depends a little bit on the individual. There's certainly a strong relationship between the leadership group now at AFL clubs, and it almost becomes player-driven. But the coach has to be balanced enough to make sure he'll make the decisions. I mean, how does a player know where the game's going to be in 5 to 10 years' time? And if you're a coach without that innovative gene to get ahead of the pack and take the game somewhere, you're going to fall behind. So the players are a part of the journey, and it can be player-driven in terms of the energy, but the direction has to come from the coaching staff. That's your responsibility. So there's a balance to it. There's a balance to it all. And you think about it, when you want to be innovative, whether that's building relationships with individuals, the teams, or increasing your kind of energy around the club, team spirit, or whatever you're doing, there's a calculated risk to that. And sometimes even the great coaches are going to make mistakes. But as I say, they'll quickly learn from that, and hopefully they're intuitive enough to make more decisions that are good than not so good. But it can be all encompassing. In terms of AFL, if that's what we're talking about, it's not good in terms of everything's lumped on the coach in terms of the responsibility of the club and the team. And really, there's an enormous coaching group and list management group and football department that really need to share that load. I think, like the NFL in AFL in years to come, that when a senior coach moves to a club, they would have already had enough experience to build up their support staff so that they're all on the one wavelength in terms of conditioning, the skill acquisition and the way they play, and get off and get running. But we haven't reached that level yet, but that'll happen in the future.
Yep. Terrific. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Good on you, Ruben.
Cheers for that.
Now, did I ramble on too much, mate?
No, that's good.